I remember the exact second my life quietly ended. It didn't happen with sirens, or screaming, or a dramatic goodbye. It happened on a Tuesday morning, while I was brushing my teeth and rehearsing a lie I had already told myself 1,000 times. That's the thing nobody tells you about regret. It doesn't crash into you. It settles in. Like dust. Like silence. If you had met me back then, you would have thought I was doing fine. I had a job that paid the bills. A home that felt acceptable. People around me said I was stable, reasonable, responsible. I wore that word like armor. Responsible. It protected me from questions I didn't want to answer. Inside, though, I felt like someone had slowly dimmed the lights without asking my permission. The first lie I told myself was simple: this is just how life is. The second lie was more dangerous: one day, I'll change it. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray myself. It happened in small, polite decisions. The kind that don't feel like decisions at all. The kind that are applauded by others. The kind that look good on paper and terrible in your soul. I remember standing at a crossroads years earlier. I didn't know that's what it was at the time. Looking back, it's painfully obvious. One path was uncertain, uncomfortable, terrifying. It required honesty, risk, and the possibility of failure. The other path promised safety, predictability, approval. I chose comfort. Not because I believed in it, but because I was afraid of what the other choice would reveal about me. People think regret comes from making bad choices. That's not true. Regret comes from making the right choice for everyone else. I became very good at explaining my life. I could justify every step. I learned how to speak in calm sentences about decisions that were slowly suffocating me. I said things like, "It's practical," and "It makes sense," and "I'm lucky, really." Every time I said those words, something inside me went quiet. At night, when the world finally stopped asking things from me, I felt it. That dull pressure in my chest. Not pain. Not sadness. Something worse. A constant, unnamed grief. The grief of a life that could have existed but didn't. I told myself I was being mature. Grown up. Realistic. But deep down, I knew the truth: I was hiding. Hiding from disappointment. Hiding from judgment. Hiding from myself. The scariest part wasn't that I was unhappy. It was that I was getting used to it. Days blended together. Weeks disappeared. Years passed so quietly it felt like time was tiptoeing around me, careful not to wake me up. I measured my life in routines instead of memories. Alarm clocks instead of moments. Every now and then, something would break through. A song offering a version of me I never became. A stranger living a life that looked terrifyingly honest. A mirror catching me at the wrong angle, showing not age, but absence. And still, I stayed. Because leaving would have meant admitting something unbearable, that I had traded truth for comfort, and called it wisdom. I told myself I didn't have a choice. That responsibilities had piled up. That it was too late now. That changing course would hurt too many people. These excuses sounded noble. They weren't. They were fear wearing expensive clothes. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from living a life you didn't choose. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. You can be praised and still feel fraudulent. You can succeed and still feel like a ghost attending your own life. I became an expert at distraction. Noise helped. Work helped. Being busy helped. Anything to avoid sitting alone with the question that kept tapping gently at the back of my mind: what did this cost me? I didn't ask that question seriously until the day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt alive. Not happy. Alive. That realization hit harder than any failure ever could. Because failure implies effort. This was different. This was erosion. A slow wearing away of something precious while I watched and did nothing. I used to believe that life would eventually reward patience. That if I endured long enough, meaning would arrive on its own. I didn't understand that meaning doesn't arrive. It's built. Chosen. Paid for. And I hadn't paid the price. The truth is, I wasn't afraid of losing everything. I was afraid of discovering that I never had it. That's when the silence got louder. And that's when the past started knocking. The past doesn't knock loudly. It waits. It knows you'll open the door eventually, when you're tired enough, quiet enough, honest enough with yourself to stop pretending you don't hear it. For me, it came back through memories I thought I had buried properly. Not dramatic moments. Not turning points with clear labels. Just small scenes replaying themselves with cruel clarity. A conversation I avoided. A truth I swallowed. A version of myself that once stood very close, asking for courage, and walked away disappointed. I started remembering who I was before I learned how to be careful. There was a time when my choices were loud. When I wanted things without apologizing for it. When fear existed, but it didn't run the show. Back then, I believed life was something you stepped into, not something you hid inside. That version of me didn't disappear overnight. I slowly trained myself to ignore them. The moment that mattered most didn't feel important at all. That's the irony. I remember sitting still, listening to someone explain why the safer option was better. More stable. Less risky. Everyone around me nodded. Their concern was genuine. Their advice was logical. Their intentions were kind. And my silence was the loudest decision I've ever made. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I let the moment pass. That's how most lives are decided. Not by bold moves, but by hesitation disguised as patience. After that, it became easier. Each compromise made the next one lighter. Each avoided risk reinforced the idea that comfort was something you earned by giving up parts of yourself. I told myself I was evolving. In reality, I was shrinking. Years later, people praised my consistency. They said I was reliable. Grounded. Solid. What they didn't see was the internal negotiation happening every single day. The constant calculation of how much truth I could afford to suppress to keep everything stable. Stability is seductive. It promises peace. What it often delivers is numbness. I noticed it first in my reactions. Things that once excited me barely registered. Things that should have hurt didn't reach deep enough. I lived in a narrow emotional range, safe from extremes, but also safe from meaning. There were moments when opportunity reappeared, wearing a different face. It always does. Life is generous like that. It gives you multiple chances to choose differently. But each time, the price felt higher. The stakes louder. The imagined consequences heavier. I had built a life that depended on me staying exactly where I was. And that's when regret sharpened its teeth. Because regret isn't just about the past. It's about the future you realize you are actively preventing. Every day you choose not to change, you are choosing to extend the same story. Again. And again. And again. I became angry at myself in quiet ways. Not explosive anger. The kind that turns inward. The kind that shows up as self-criticism, impatience, exhaustion. I was tired without being tired. Heavy without carrying anything physical. The scariest realization came late one night, sitting alone with no distractions left. I wasn't afraid of failing anymore. I was afraid of trying. Trying meant hope. Hope meant risk. Risk meant confronting the possibility that I had been wrong all along. Wrong about what I wanted. Wrong about what mattered. Wrong about who I was. It felt easier to stay disappointed than to be vulnerable. People talk about finding yourself as if you're lost somewhere out there. The truth is, you know exactly where you are. You just don't like the cost of leaving. I started asking myself uncomfortable questions. Not philosophical ones. Practical ones. Honest ones. Questions without poetry or excuses. If nothing changes, will I accept this life? If I'm still here in 10 years, will I recognize myself? If this is safety, why does it feel like a cage? The answers were quiet, but they were consistent. No. No. And no. Still, knowing isn't the same as acting. Awareness doesn't automatically turn into courage. Sometimes it just makes the waiting more painful. I stood on the edge for a long time. Not moving forward. Not stepping back. Just standing there, watching my life continue without my full participation. What finally broke me wasn't a disaster. It wasn't loss. It wasn't tragedy. It was the realization that nobody was coming to stop me. No moment of clarity. No external permission. No dramatic signal. Just me. And the next decision. That's when I understood something brutal and freeing at the same time. The cost of comfort is paid daily. And the bill always comes due. The moment I finally moved didn't feel heroic. There was no dramatic soundtrack. No sudden confidence. Just a quiet exhaustion that ran deeper than fear. I was tired of negotiating with myself. Tired of postponing my own life like it was an optional expense. I realized something uncomfortable. Staying had become harder than leaving. That's when the illusion broke. The illusion that my choices were neutral. That doing nothing was harmless. That time would somehow forgive me for indecision. Time doesn't forgive. It records. I looked at my life honestly for the first time. Not with shame. Not with excuses. Just with clarity. This was the life I had built by choosing comfort over truth. And while it wasn't terrible, it wasn't mine. That distinction matters more than people admit. I thought about the years ahead, stretching forward like an empty hallway. Same routines. Same conversations. Same internal silence. I imagined myself older, still explaining why I never left, why I never tried, why I never answered the question that mattered most. And suddenly, regret stopped being abstract. It had a shape. A future version of me, still waiting. I didn't make one big, reckless move. I didn't burn everything down. That's another myth. Change rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It often looks inconvenient. Awkward. Slow. But it starts with one honest decision. I chose to stop lying. Not to others. To myself. I admitted that I wanted more, even if I didn't know exactly what that more looked like yet. I admitted that fear had been steering for years. I admitted that safety had become a hiding place, not a foundation. The fear didn't disappear. It never does. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear be the final authority. There were consequences. Of course there were. Comfort doesn't let go quietly. Some people didn't understand. Some relationships shifted. Some certainties collapsed. I lost things I thought I needed. What I gained was something quieter but heavier. Ownership. For the first time in years, my days felt connected. Not easy. Not perfect. But aligned. I felt present inside my own decisions. When things went wrong, they were my mistakes. When things went right, they felt earned. I stopped asking, what's the safest option? I started asking, what's the honest one? That single change rewired everything. Life didn't suddenly become meaningful every day. That's another lie people sell. Meaning isn't constant. It flickers. It shows up in moments. In effort. In risk. In choosing again and again not to abandon yourself. There are still days when the old comfort whispers to me. When stability looks tempting. When retreat feels easier than progress. But now I recognize the voice. I know what it costs. I understand something now that I didn't back then. Every decision is a trade. You are always paying for something. The only question is whether you're paying with fear or with regret. Regret compounds. Fear doesn't. Fear shrinks when you move. Regret grows when you don't. I don't regret the life I lived before. It taught me the difference between existing and choosing. Between surviving and participating. Between comfort and truth. If you're listening to this and you feel that quiet pressure in your chest, that unnamed heaviness, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not broken. You're not late. You're not ungrateful. You're just standing at a crossroads you've been pretending isn't there. The life you want doesn't require permission. It requires a decision. Not a perfect plan. Not guaranteed success. Just honesty. Time will pass anyway. Years will move whether you act or not. And one day, you will look back at this moment. The question is simple. Will you thank yourself for choosing truth, or forgive yourself for choosing comfort? I know my answer now. And it finally feels like my life has begun.